Hey everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video review, and today we're going to be doing Justice League Rise and Fall. Take a look at this comic cover right here. Now, Justice League Rise and Fall is the sequel to Justice League Cry for Justice. And if any of you remember, I absolutely despised Cry for Justice. I really did not like it at all. The story was a mess from the beginning, with plot holes and thrown together and just at points made no sense. The characters completely out of character with horrible dialogue. And the worst of all, the breaking point for me personally, was the fact that they killed off Roy Harper's daughter, Leanne. Now see, I'm going to vent a little because see, I was very attached to this girl. And putting all attachment of her aside, to see a little girl, no older than 4 or 5, get killed off is just, well, disgusting and wrong and morbid and twisted. I mean, it's just, ugh. This is a little girl getting killed off. It's something that really shouldn't be done in comics. Now, a lot of people can argue, well, what about half the Titans that get killed off? Or what about Jason Todd when he got killed off? Yes, that's true. They weren't adults and they did get killed off. However, there's a big difference between their death and her death. They are costume superheroes. They are teenagers. They are not 4-year-old girls getting killed off. Despite the fact that her father was a superhero, and despite the fact that she did have relationships in the superhero community, she was not part of it. She is not a mass vigilante going around fighting evil. She's a little girl that goes to preschool and plays with her father, and she gets killed off. It's just disgusting because it's a little girl getting killed off. In addition to that, it takes something away from Roy Harper, because one of the character traits that made Roy a cool character, besides the fact that he was a recovering addict, is the fact that he was a single father. Now, this is unique because you really don't see many single fathers in comic books. You see single mothers sometimes, but the only other real single father that you can point out is kind of Bruce Wayne, and it's more or less because he adopted these children. They're not actually legitimately his own blood. They are his adopted children. But Roy Harper is much different from Bruce Wayne in the fact that this is his child, and it was a unique character dynamic. And then they got and ruined it all by taking her away. I had a big attachment to this little girl. So, for me, venting right now is probably healthy. Because, see, I went through the Titan comics and the Outsider comics, reading this character, growing with her, and although she wasn't prevalent in all the stories, to see Roy go home after fighting a bunch of villains, and to pick up his daughter and to play with her, it was just touching. There's no greater bond than between a father and his children, a mother and their children. In the eyes of a child, their parents is God. And the dynamic, the interactions between those two characters, between father and daughter, was just sweet and very emotional. It was small things, too. Like in one of the Outsider stories, she came home from school and she went up to her father and he said, "What did you learn in school today?" And she said, "Guess what?" He said, "What?" "Guess what?" "What?" "Guess what?" "What?" "Chicken butt." That's such a silly little thing, but it's sweet to see. So I have not only emotional attachment to this character, and not only was she important to Roy Harper, and not only the fact that she was just killed off in such a disgusting way, it's just taking so much away from comics, and it's hurting the readers more so than DC may think. I'm a big supporter on a lot of stuff DC does, but sometimes they make decisions that I can't support, and this is one of them. I'm sorry if I went off and vented a little too much about this girl getting killed, but it is very disturbing for me, not only because of the emotional attachment, but because she's a little girl and she's getting killed off. So the question is this. With the bad taste that Cry for Justice left in my mouth, let me add, that bad taste is still there, will Rise and Fall follow suit? Will it be like its predecessor? Will it just be horrible with no real story, bad dialogue, and just absolutely be a trash heap? Or will it take the negatives that were established in Cry for Justice and turn them into positives? Use the emotions that were put in Cry for Justice and fuel a story that has a lot of ups and downs, emotions for the readers and the characters. These are all questions that will get answered at the end of the review. So with that said, let's jump into the actual story itself. The story is told from two different perspectives, a rise and fall perspective. That's the theme. It's the rise of Arsenal and the fall of Green Arrow. We start off from Green Arrow's perspective. Now, when we last left off with Ollie, he killed Prometheus. And basically, his story is just dealing with the ramifications of that. How people view him, his friends, his family, his enemies, and how he keeps secrets from people. And in addition to that, there's a lot of conflict there. He really has no friends. Eventually, it comes to the point where he decides to bring himself in and to turn himself into the court. And his future basically hangs in the balance of a jury. The second perspective of the story comes from Arsenal, Red Arrow, Roy Harper, whatever you want to call him. For the sake of this review, I'm going to call him Roy. Now, Roy, at first, doesn't even know his daughter died. All he knows is he got his arm torn off. But within just a few minutes, he's told, and it is just absolutely devastating to him. It gets so devastating that he closes himself off from the people he loves, to the point that he actually turns on them, flips out at them. He has the anger inside that should be directed towards his enemies, directed towards his friends and family. And it gets so bad that he starts doing drugs again. He starts going out and hunting down people. He starts turning into Arsenal. But not the Arsenal we knew. No. This is a bad vigilante Arsenal, more like Punisher than Red Arrow was. And slowly but surely, Roy is going off on the deep end. With all the drugs, anger, and sorrow, he doesn't know how to balance it all. And his friends are trying their best to keep him in balance, to help him work through this. But it's just not working out. And that's the basic story. It's more or less Green Arrow and Roy Harper trying to deal with the ramifications that happen in Cries of Justice. Other characters are predominant in this, like Dick Grayson, or Black Canary, or Green Lantern and Flash, but really the main two characters here are Green Arrow and Roy Harper. So, with that said, let's get into the good, the bad, and whether or not you should get it. I guess I definitely should start off with good. Ease the blow a bit. One thing that's good about this story is it does take the negative of this girl dying and turn it into an emotional story. Whether or not it's a positive emotional story, I'll leave it up to you. But there were parts where I was getting a little teary-eyed, I was getting that little lump in my stomach. And I'll admit it, I mean, there's this father who's lost the most important thing in his life. And he is just grieving in ways that I don't think anyone could understand unless they were put in his situation. It was really sad to read. And if that's what they were trying to get across, then they did a good job at doing that. I was genuinely sad, emotionally torn up over these fictional characters who are grieving and dealing with the death of someone so important to them, a little girl, a daughter. So, in that, they did a good job with that. In addition to that, Arsenal's character is portrayed as best as he can in this position. Roy is grieving just how I wanted him to. He went off the loose end a little. He went into a few things he shouldn't have. I really don't think they should have had him started using drugs again. However, he's grieving in a way that's very accessible for what happened in the previous story. And they do it in such a great way. He basically closes himself off to all people trying to help him. And I really feel a lot of sympathy to him, not only because of his loss, but also because there's really no hope for him when it comes down to healing, at least not at this point. So they really worked the Roy Harper stories, at least for his character perspective, very nicely. With the exception of what happens at the very end and him getting into drugs. But those I can kind of put aside. Bad. Well, this continues to ruin the character of Green Arrow for me. I have nothing really against Green Arrow so much. In my perspective, there's no such thing as a good character or a bad character. It's just how they are written. A lot of people get into arguments on whether or not Jason Todd is a good character or not. It really doesn't matter, because it's how he's written. Same thing could be said for Oliver Queen. However, I really never liked Oliver Queen because he just comes off as so much of a self-centered prick. It's plain, flat, and simple. My first real negative experience of him being a prick is when he started to stick his nose in Hawksman's business. He doesn't understand Hawksman's life or what he was going through with Kendra, and he just stuck his nose in there, and it was rude and it was just wrong. He was a dickhead. And this was even more revealing how of a dickhead he was. As a father towards Connor, as a father towards another son that he had, which I didn't know about, how much of a dick he was to Black Canary, and just in general, he comes off as a total, complete prick. There's nothing rewarding him as a character. The only time that he's ever viewed in a positive light in here is during the Roy Harper stories where he's behind bars. But even then, it's still not good because he's pretty much a hypocrite. He's telling Roy not to kill a person that is responsible for his daughter's death, but just a few stories ago, he killed Prometheus and it was quite alright. And he has no remorse for it either. I don't really understand what they were trying to get at with that. It kind of is confusing. So this even ruins the character of Oliver Queen to me more and more. It seems like writers just want to write him as a prick. I'm not saying it's bad to have a character that has faults. Maybe he keeps secrets or he lies every once in a while. Or maybe he can be a little bit of a backstabber to his friends sometimes. But what they do with Oliver Queen on some stories just takes it overboard. At first, I was actually very much against him not being with Black Canary. I thought they were a good couple, especially from the stuff I read during the Silver and Bronze Age. But after reading how he treated her in this, I'm like, you go, girl. Kick his ass out of the door. That sounded really weird, but the fact of the matter is this kind of ruined Green Arrow even more for me. That's more of a personal gripe than anything, but coming down from a pure story perspective, his character was portrayed badly. Very badly. It's like they had to make a bad guy in this that wasn't a bad guy, so they chose Green Arrow. And I guess out of all the possible choices, he would have been the best, but it's still, not good. In addition to that, outside of the grieving and dealing with the death of Leanne, there's no real story to this. It's just the grieving. That's about it. No real ending. I haven't seen anything done with Roy recently. I know Green Arrow's off being Robin Hood in the forest, but really, there's no real conclusion. And I guess there shouldn't be, but as a reader, I kind of want one. So on the whole, whether or not you should get it. Let me make one statement clear. Despite the fact that this aroused emotions in me, brought sadness to me, I still don't like the story. It has a few good points here and there, but in the end, it's just taking something that was bad beforehand and trying to work with it. And I really don't want to see any more of this. I don't want to see any more of this girl's death. I don't want to see any more of Green Arrow. I'm done with it. I just want, my hands are clean. Clean. When it comes down to it, though, this story is better than Cry for Justice. Only in the way that Cry for Justice was infinitely more bad than this. Doesn't mean that this is particularly a good story, but it's just not downright as horrible as the other one. It's a little bit more forgiving because the writer had to deal with the shit from the previous story. So I don't blame the writer at all. It's just really, oh God, why did DC do this? I love you guys. I love you as a comic book company, but bad choice in comics. Bad choice in stories. So with that said, Rise and Fall. Don't pick it up. Save your $24 that you would be getting for this hardcover. It is not worth your money, nor your time. This is Andrew saying peace out for now.